Welcome. Welcome, Valerie. We've got a principal. We've got an ITF. We got a couple of coaches. Hello, Miss Spinella. Welcome, Melissa. All right, so I'm going to start diving in. Welcome, Jan. We're going to get started. So this session is all about using professional development and coaching for school growth. We're going to dive into some resources today. As we're doing that, I am going to 100% feel like I am dropping a whole bunch of stuff at you or throwing it at you. Please stop me at any time. You're welcome to put something into the chat or turn your camera on or just kind of say something into the mic. I want this to be, I want you guys to feel free to speak out and ask questions and give suggestions because that's what we're here for. But before we get started, a little bit about myself. My name is Dr. Ashley McBride. Until about yesterday, I was the Director of Technology for Dare County Schools. Starting on Monday, I will be the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction's in the digital teaching and learning team. Hold on, I remembered the name a little bit ago. I am the Digital Teaching and Learning Initiative Coordinator starting on Monday. So I'm very excited about the transition. Prior to all of that, I was an English teacher for secondary English. I taught middle and high school at various times. Then I was an instructional technology facilitator for about 3 years, and then moved into the district role of IT project manager, where I learned the technical side of the house, and then went to be a director of technology. So I have done a great deal of work in professional development, design and implementation, both at the school level and then at the district level. A little bit more about that. When I was an English teacher, one of the things that I did was there was a lot of me trying to do research and trying to figure out best practices and stuff. And I felt like there wasn't really a structure that helped provide me the support I needed in order to grow. So when I became an ITF, I tried to design a structure that would support teachers, not only by providing them professional development, but offering them coaching and supports that focused around that professional development. About that time, I started my doctorate in educational technology, and all of my research focused on professional development for educational technology for K-12 teachers. And then it evolved into doing research on coaching. So that is where all of this information came from. I will point you to a website called EdTech Coaching Primer. And that is a website, and full disclosure, I have a book coming out with ISTE called the EdTech Coaching Primer. And that houses all the resources that you'll get from this session, but also other resources that go along with the book that will be coming out at the end of July. So I just throwing that out there. I'm not here to sell you anything. I am here to talk to you about professional development. So I see that we have a few directors, we have a few administrators, we have a couple of coaches, which I think is a phenomenal mix for us. what I would like you to do is in the chat box, or if you feel comfortable enough to turn your camera on and speak out, how do you provide professional development now? So if you want to just jump in and talk, that would be phenomenal. If you are more comfortable with the chat box, drop it in there so we can all see it. How do you provide professional development now? Mostly virtual. Ask what needs are and then try to tailor it. That's good. Megan, do you do a needs analysis of any sort, or do you just ask around? And we've got live during PLC time or after school. School improvement goals. We got Canvas courses. Okay, Megan sends out a Google form. Micro credentials. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, they have a lot of
YouTube channel.
Yeah, what we do is we're very big podcast fans, and we were interested in doing a podcast. And then we got to thinking, we were like, well, maybe we should do a video podcast where we just casually talk through things. So the very first one we did was about teaching ELLs from a distance, and we had made it a PD and actually had a PD, but we thought, well, how can these teachers access this when they couldn't come to the PD and still get credit. So what we did was we made the YouTube channel. We added vodcasting. We called it Ready Set EdTech, and we made it like a podcast. And we would say, "I'm Lindsay, I'm Jan," and we would show a presentation, go through it together, talk between ourselves about the information, kind of like a podcast. And then when we decided through our micro-credentials, we already created micro-credentials on various things for them to get credit for, and they have to turn in like a submission form with, some artifacts and stuff like that from the micro-credentials so they get credit. So we decided to turn our podcasts into micro-credentials as well. So we would put the videos on our micro-credentials through Canvas, and they could either watch it on their own time on YouTube, without credit, or they could go into the micro-credentials and enroll and watch the videos and actually turn in an artifact and earn credit. So that's how we did that.
I love that. I wonder, is that something, Jan, that you guys, your YouTube, do you share that outside of the district too, or is that just in-house?
Well, we made a YouTube channel just for digital learning, but it also is public too. So you could go to YouTube and type Ready Set EdTech and you'd find the videos.
I was going to say, feel free to drop in the chat, the link for anybody who might want that.
Sure. And we just started this past school year. So we've got probably about 4 or 5, and we add one periodically here and there when we have time. But I'll put in the link. Sure. No problem.
Thank you. All right, so I'm seeing a lot of mix of in-person, some virtual. We've got the YouTube channels. We've got the needs surveys through Google Forms. That's awesome, and I love. Aaron, are you popping in to answer? Or? Okay, I love that there's so many. Different answers. I think that COVID has definitely forced us into this virtual world. But what I want to talk to you about right now is, and I think I recognize 1 or 2 of you from the last session, but this is the same research that I pulled for that one. I have some research on professional development and what provides the most growth for teachers in whenever they're doing PD. The Learning Policy Institute did a meta-analysis, and that just basically means that they took a lot of different research studies and compiled all of the information together. which makes it super easy. So you don't have to read all 34 or 36 research studies that they did. There is documentation there if you'd like. You can click on the fact sheet and just get the bare minimum of what you need to know from that, or you can look at the full report. But in this meta-analysis, they mentioned that professional development that has the most impact on actual instructional changes are content focused. It incorporates active learning strategies within the actual professional development itself. It supports collaboration. And if you dig a little deeper, it supports collaboration among the teachers and then also collaboration among a coach or whoever the people who are doing the sessions. And then uses models of effective practice. So really modeling what you want. So if you're looking for teachers to change their practices to more blended learning, then the professional development should look more like the blended learning sessions that you want to see in the classrooms, as opposed to, you know, a sit and get PD that's saying you should use blended learning and then you're not providing that for the teachers. Provides coaching, which I think is a lot of where there's a lot of room for growth in that, as far as coaching is concerned, and making sure that you're implementing coaching alongside of professional development. But it's a very critical piece in order to offer those supports. It offers feedback and reflection time. So not just feedback from the coach or the person who's doing the professional learning or working on the professional learning with teachers, but also providing time for reflection themselves, the participants. And then it is of a sustained duration. And I want to make this really, really clear that when I say sustained duration, it doesn't mean one session, one coaching, and then you move on. It is years. So there was a different research study, and I wish I would have linked it in here, but that was specifically showing technology PD, where, and I'll try to go back and add it to this, where the first year they didn't see a whole lot of change, but the second year and the third year, they saw a great deal of change in teachers' actual practices. And when I did professional development and coaching alongside teachers when I was an ITF, I had interviewed them and gotten feedback at the very end of the year. And what I noticed was what they were learning that year, they were implementing little things, but they planned on implementing more in the next year or two, knowing that they were going to have that support to make larger changes. So a sustained duration, we're talking multiple years, not just one, or not just a one and done type thing. So I wanted to make sure that you had this research, and that's kind of what the basis, this is kind of the backbone of a lot of the stuff that I've done in the past. So I want to talk about formal professional learning. And this is something that we've done a lot of virtually. There's a lot of videos that teachers can go reach out and get to. We've got the YouTube channels now. As Ms. Spinella pointed out, you know, there's databases like Kite Learning where teachers, some districts are using that for teachers to be able to get to. But what's important is when you're providing professional learning to teachers, or you're providing time for teachers to do professional learning, it needs to be regularly scheduled. I personally like monthly because that's a great separation of time, is once a month for them to really kind of dig in during the professional learning and then kind of have a month to kind of play with what they've learned. But making sure that it's regularly scheduled and that it's focused on a goal. So somebody in here mentioned, and I just don't remember which one of you it was, said that you are based on SIP goals, school improvement goals. And I see it's Jennifer. So Jennifer mentioned, they do it after school, they do it during PLC time, and it's all based on school improvement goals, which is exactly what I mean when I say focused on a goal, whether it's a school goal, or maybe the PLC has decided on a goal, or maybe there's different goals according to choice. So the teachers could choose, and I'll dig into that a little bit more. But it's important to make sure that this time is both convenient and protected. So as an example, when I was in ITF, my principal and I worked on a monthly schedule that happened after school, because that was the best time for our teachers. And we wanted to make sure that we were able to have mixed groups outside of PLCs of teachers to work. So we actually scheduled once a month, and they knew when school started, what days that was. And so it was already scheduled, and that time was protected. I think there was only once we had to move it, and it was because of snow days and things like that. As a tech director, I had been working with my instructional technology facilitators on doing this, and many of them used professional learning time, so PLC time, with their teachers. So they were able to go into smaller groups, and they were able to work with the English teachers, the math teachers, or for my elementary and middle school friends, they did it often by grade level. So there's different goals that you can focus on. And then making sure that time is convenient and protected. So I'm going to pull open these resources, and this is the site that I was referencing, and of course it's going to take a minute. So if you look at the top, notice that I like to make sure that everybody is going in the same direction, that there is a vision. What is it that we want teaching and learning to look like at the end of all of this? What is the vision in the end? How do we want everything to roll out? And then taking that vision and breaking it into instructional goals. Now, I know it says instructional technology goals. This is because the book is focused on instructional technology. So, but instructional goals, what is it? Do you want blended learning strategies? Do you want more personalized learning? What are those goals that you're focused on? And then you choose the goal, and then you build the professional development underneath of it. Down here are a number of templates. So when you are planning that professional development, and these are all suggestions, you have that instructional technology goal, and then you start planning. So this is a document that's intended to help plan. So you put the professional learning goal. What is the goal? What is the best time for sessions to meet? What is the session length that you imagine for this? So if it's during PLC time, obviously there's going to be a specific length you're going to have to go with. And then this is the brainstorm document, essentially. What's the title? What's the description? What materials is the person who's presenting this stuff going to need to have with them or have available to participants? And then is there any pre-work? One of the things that when I was in ITF, my teachers, at the very end of me working with them for a year, I did a number of interviews with them and asked them, how could I do this better? What is it that worked for you? What didn't work for you? One of the things that they said was, because we did it after school, I started the session at 4, and then I had 4 different groups studying 4 different things all at one time. So they were in smaller groups. So I did a lot of, I made flipped in type videos where I talked to them via a screencast, and then they had resources to dig through, podcasts, things like that. Well, I built all of that in to the beginning of the session in the first 20 minutes. And then the rest of the session, the last 40 minutes was all collaboration and activity time, where they actually dug in and did work together. The suggestion I had given to me multiple times was, why don't you give us that a week in advance, and then we can do it whenever we want. And for people who didn't get a chance and need that 20 minutes, session starts at 4. For people who don't need it and they could work on grades or whatever for 20 minutes before they came, they start at 4:20. And so just the idea of having some pre-work was something that I had not done until after I had done those interviews with them. And then once you've brainstormed, you can just put dates and organize, what should go first, what should go second. And in some instances, that's going to be useful to you. And some you're going to maybe want the PLCs to choose. So. All right. This next resource is a professional learning planning request tool. So this is with the intention of the person who's doing professional learning, whether it's the principal, if you're a coach, if you're a lead teacher, if it's a group of teachers, if you say, these are all of the sessions that we're planning that meet this goal. So if you're talking about blended learning structures, and one of your sessions is just the basics of blended learning structures, flipped classrooms, or resources for collecting data in a blended learning structure, you would put like the session titles here and then session descriptions. And then if you're working in PLCs, you could give them this at the very beginning of the school year and let the PLCs decide which session goes where. So you say, here are the dates that we're planning on doing professional learning, and here are the sessions and the descriptions. Plug in what dates you want it. So that way, if they know that they've got certain units coming up and they know that they need to talk about data collection in a blended learning environment the second month before they hit a specific unit, then they can do that. They can request it at the time that works best for them. All right, so that's all really just planning and brainstorming. I do have a question for you guys. Do you guys brainstorm any way that you'd like to share with everybody? Or do you have any questions about those couple of resources or brainstorming pieces that I talked about? Appropriate wait time. All right, so I'm going to take that as we are good to move forward. The next two resources that I have for you, this first one is, if you were to say, this is our school improvement goal, these are the sessions, and you were to want to say, these are the dates and the times and all of the things, this is the document to put all of that kind of final information in so you could give it to your teachers. So date, session title, description, session format. So one of the things, especially since COVID, is you could say, 1 month we're going to do a virtual format. Maybe it's a day that you have a remote learning day. Maybe it's a day that you have a professional development day, but you're still trying to keep teachers, let's do this virtually. Or maybe it's a face-to-face session, or just whatever that format might be. You could also have them do something, say that district was doing a professional development. You could plug that in and say, we're all going to do this, but then we're going to collaborate about what we learned afterwards. Then what are those materials that you need? And then any pre-work that they need to be aware of. And this could be a living document. And then I just wanted to provide this one as well. So when I did this, my teachers chose which goal they wanted to focus on. So we actually had 4 goals. Some of the teachers wanted to focus on data. Some of them wanted to focus on digital learning environments. And so we gave them the choice of which goal, and then we matched up sessions. So like I said, they would come in and there would be 4 different sessions going on, and they would go to the table that best met their goal. So this is a way to kind of show all of that. And then finally, the last resource I really have is a professional learning planning document, which is essentially the lesson plan for the actual session, because all of the other resources, they're high level, like what's the description, what are some of the resources you need, but this digs deep into what are the objectives of the session activities, what's actually happening, and then making sure that you get a feedback survey for professional learning, because you want to make sure that you're getting that feedback from teachers and making sure you're meeting their needs. So what I want to do is, I've spoken for a long time and I'm not a huge fan of listening to me speak. So I would like to put everybody into groups of about 3 or 4 people and just have a brainstorm session of looking at these tools or looking at next year and thinking about what it is that you could adjust or tweak for professional learning. So, and I think instead of doing small groups, I think I'm just going to go ahead and have us have it in here because we're kind of a small group already. So looking at some of that, because again, I feel like I dropped a lot and we're not even to the coaching stuff yet. I want to hear from you guys. What are some things that you could tweak for next year to make sure that you're providing regularly scheduled sessions and it's convenient and protected time?
As far as convenient and protected time, it just has to be a priority. It has to be something that you have a focus on. Last year, we were so much in survival and getting from day to day. If you insist on having this and having it dedicated, it needs to be very targeted, very specific, very precise, consistent. And whether you have something like an earlier session about early release days or 2-hour delays or whatever, you have to make it a priority so that it becomes a priority.
Right. And I think that lands a lot on administrators to make sure that that time is a priority and it's protected. Getting the PLC schedule with the principal, yeah. Making sure that that PLC schedule is there and you understand it and you can jump in with them. Anybody else? Anybody have suggestions? Because one of my biggest fears is we've been virtual, we've been face to face, and when we come back, hopefully full-fledged face to face all year next year, are we going to take the best practices of what we learned in virtual and adjust teaching and learning to be more inclusive and more engaging for students so that they can engage in the curriculum differently? How can we build professional learning to do that? So Anybody have any other suggestions or thoughts on that? All right. Well, so the next question I'm going to ask you. Oh, yeah. Spinella says that she's intrigued by the YouTube platform. How do you know when teachers have watched so you can follow up? So I think that's a good question for Jan. Jan, do you have a way that you check to see if they have watched?
Well, with the videos, we want it to be kind of personal PD, like when they wanted to. And we can see not who viewed it, but how many views we have. Now, the way we know, we only use it for their preferences. It wasn't anything mandatory. How we can measure them is if they take the micro-credential for it, then they're able to print an artifact. We basically just did it because it was hard to get teachers to buy into having PD on time, especially with remote learning and them, especially when they went back into the classroom and they were doing half remote, half face-to-face, and they were stressed, and we just couldn't get them to meet for PD. We tried these after school, we call it spilling the tea series, where we would, and we didn't get very much participation. So we decided just to have it as a on their own kind of PD that they could do to help them, with their professional development. It wasn't anything mandatory. But now the micro-credentials aren't mandatory either. It's just what they feel they need, and they do get credit for those micro-credentials.
All right. Thank you, Jan. All right. So do you have a dedicated coaching role? Now, this could be an instructional coach, an ITF. You could even have a librarian do coaching, or I'm just curious. So can you pop this in the chat or answer verbally, either way? Do you have a dedicated coaching role? Because that really dictates kind of how I talk about this. Yes, Spinella does. All right, instructional coaching. There's a district one. Okay. ITFs and content leads. Aaron, is that an ITF for every building or an ITF for every 2 or 3 buildings? Out of curiosity. And I guess that's a good question for everybody. Those of you who are saying you have a dedicated coaching role, is that one coach per building, or is it one coach for every few buildings? Okay, curriculum specialist in every school. Instructional coach in every building. Split between buildings. Every building. All right, so we've got kind of a mix. One on site, all subjects. Okay. Four digital learning coaches for 14 schools. I'm a coach for my school. We also have 5 ITFs for the district. All right, great. So hopefully the resources I give you will help, but I do want to talk about coaching itself. So coaching, when I have spoken to people about coaching, coaching has this very wide definition. I've spoken to people and said, do you coach, or how do you coach? And a lot of times it's, well, I get in with the teacher, we have conversations about their lesson plans, we have, it's a lot of informal. which is great. Informal time working with your coaches is phenomenal. But there's also a lot to be said for some formal coaching structures like coaching cycles. My next session at 3:30 goes deep into coaching cycles, and specifically ed tech coaching cycles, which could be used by anybody, honestly. But I wanted to show you, so here I have one way to kind of get out to teachers what coaching services are available. I know when I was in ITF, it was really, really hard for my teachers to really wrap their heads around what it was that I did as a coach. It was a lot of, well, she fixed my Google Classroom when I have a problem, or she'll help me set up or pick a tool in order to make class more fun and engaging. But in fact, coaching, whether you're an instructional coach, an ITF, or a literacy coach, math coach, whatever, those people are really working on teaching and learning strategies. It doesn't have to be specifically pinpointed in the ITF's world. It doesn't have to specifically be pinpointed just in working with a specific technology. It can be about blended learning. It can be about anything to help improve the classroom. So here is that's just an example of what you could give to teachers on services. But the two big things when we're talking about coaching and aligning it with your professional development is you've already got, if you can get the buy-in, this special schedule of professional development. So that's kind of the backbone. And then you can do coaching cycles and teacher supports that jump directly off of that professional development. So for instance, say that the first week of the month, you do PD about blended learning structures. And you go into a teacher's classroom and you're having a conversation, informal or planned, either way, and they say, well, you were talking about making these screencast videos or flipping the classroom or whatever the lesson was, but I still don't understand it. Can you somehow show it to me? That's where the coach can come in and model it in the classroom during an actual lesson. Or they could say, I really, really, really want to change this unit I'm about to do in 2 weeks so that we're doing it in a blended way. I'm just not sure how to do that. That's a great time for the coach to come in and co-plan, and then even come in and co-teach that lesson, depending on the teacher's comfort level with that. Or you could be looking at same thing, blended learning. They could say, well, I don't understand how the students are getting what they need if I am just throwing stuff at them. And then you can really come in as a coach and say, how are you gathering data about your students? And how can we build the blended learning structure within your class for this unit? How can we build this unit so that that data is being used to really build out and meet those students where they're needed? So I'm going to dive into teacher supports first, because that's one that once you can do it off of the professional development, or you could do it off of the coaching cycles themselves. So research, a teacher may come and say, hey, I don't understand how to do this, or I want to incorporate blogging in my classroom or get my students writing more. How do I do that effectively? The coach can go and research. Co-planning, I've got a couple resources for you here. One of the struggles I had as an ITF was during co-planning sessions and during some of my coaching sessions was really just a problem with staying focused and making sure we were getting through everything. So prior to the co-planning session, if you're doing a co-planning session, to support teachers. Really just getting them some questions to make sure that the coach is ready to come in and do that co-planning session. The other piece that I have here is a co-planning agenda. So I would often sit down with teachers and we would get lost in conversation. And so just an agenda of, we're going to sit down and the teacher's going to tell me everything that they want for this lesson, all of their experiences, about 10 minutes for the teacher just to talk it out. And then another 10 minutes for the teacher to give successes and struggle points, whether it's with her current class, like her students, what things are they great at? What things does he or she struggle with? And then anything success or struggle points with past implementations of the lesson or unit. Then the coach can come back with this is what I heard you say. You want to implement this. Your goals are here. And these are the successes and struggles that you currently have. So that way everybody's on the same page. Then the 2 of you or 3 of you, or if you're co-planning with a PLC, sit down and really define the goals of the lesson itself. And then my favorite part, and this is the part I always got stuck on, was the what if, which is really just a time to brainstorm, okay, if these are your goals, and these are your struggles, what if we did this? Or what if we did that? And really just brainstorm. Then moving from that to actually drafting, walking through the lesson and adjusting it, and then planning out next steps, especially if you're co-teaching, trying to figure out who's going to do what during the actual lesson. All right. So, and then providing that co-teaching support, that modeling support, and that data analysis and usage support. So again, all of this just stems off of that original vision, that goal for professional learning. You're working on professional development options for teachers, and then you're coming in behind it and you're giving them all of these supports. Any suggestions you guys have for others on supports, or any questions you have? Again, I feel like I'm talking a lot and throwing a lot of stuff at you. I'm going to wait for the appropriate amount of time. All right, so I'm going to dive into coaching cycles, and we're just going to touch the surface of this. I'm going to do this more in depth in my next session, but coaching cycles are a more formal process. So you've got professional development goals, and then teachers can request for a coaching cycle to happen. And that coach can come in and observe, then go in and provide feedback and reflection time for the teacher. They can sit down together and really plan out, okay, so in the observation, you reflected on this. How can I support you as you go to meet the goals that you have for yourself and your classroom? And then that implement and support piece is really just going back to, do you guys plan on co-teaching? Does that teacher want you to come in and help co-plan? Do they want you to come in and model for them? Do they want additional resources? So are you providing more research? Are they wanting you to dig very deeply into data with you? So that is kind of the idea behind formal coaching cycles, and the rationale for formal coaching cycles is really just to give a partner in the class for the teacher. The other piece of it is, if the coach is observing and in the classroom, they can see things that are necessary for professional development, so that it's not 100% reliant on the teachers to know what it is that they need, because you don't know what you don't know. So the teacher could need support in an area that they don't even think about. I actually had one time somebody was observing me and they told me that I talked to the right. And I was unintentionally, I'm right-handed. I would talk to the right of the class. And so just them observing me and just making that comment really helped me to kind of remember, I've got kids on the left too. That's a simplistic. Jan asks, would you say that coaching cycles work better when you are in the schools on a daily basis? Yes. You are currently splitting 14 schools between 2 of you. We were only able to be at the schools once a month. This year, we're adding 2 more coaches, so we'll be able to be in the schools at least once a week now. So yes, so coaching cycles now, you're going to probably want to be really cognizant on how you schedule this if you're jumping from school to school. But I would start with maybe 1 or 2 people who are really interested in this. I would not start coaching cycles with somebody. I wouldn't just grab them and say, hey, let's do a coaching cycle. I would offer it, whether you're offering it during professional development or you're talking to the teachers all at once, or you're giving them a document that says I can do coaching cycles with you. I would start with just 1. And then you could gather information about what those coaching cycles have done for those teachers as a whole. But yes, it is much easier to do when you are in one school all day. But it can be scheduled out, because when you go into a coaching cycle, they're going to know when you're going to observe them. So you would go in and you could, if you're saying you're in there once a week, you could observe, give them a week to reflect, and then meet with them that next week to talk about their reflection and your feedback. And you could use that same time to plan, or you could do the following week to really kind of sit down, and as you're talking about it, really discuss how can I support you. And so your coaching cycle would be longer in time, which is fine. I strongly believe, I know that there are coaching cycles out there, and they're great coaching cycles, but there's a couple of them out there that are very prescriptive and say, you're going to do this on this day, this on this day, this on this day. And it's like a 3-week cycle. That's not necessarily doable for everybody. Which is why I kind of put together all the research and all the different coaching cycles and put these pieces together. So easing in is really about finding one person. And there is an episode. So if you're on my site here, one of these is podcast blog page. And I actually do an ed tech coaching podcast. And there is a one that just came out during ISTE at the end of June with Nikita Porter. And she and I have a conversation about how she got started into coaching cycles. She walked into a school that was not used to coaches being in the classroom. And she really changed their perspective. And the way she did it was, she picked 1 or 2 teachers. I think she said 3 that first year, and 1 failed. Like they failed miserably. Like the teacher wasn't ready. So I think it's really about picking 1 or 2 people. And then after like 3 years, she ended up with like 15 who were a regular scheduled coaching cycle, because they were waiting for that first person to kind of jump in. So my suggestion would be find the one or 2 people that you know are going to buy into this. Just offer it up, and and then let them be the ones by word of mouth to say, hey, because my coach was in the class observing me and they saw this and we were able to plan out how they could support me so that I could meet my goals, or that I could do this with my students and otherwise I wouldn't have been able to. So I really think that that's the way, is really to just start with those early adopters. All right. Any other questions or thoughts on any of that? I'm going to hold off and go really deep into the coaching cycles in the next session. I just don't want to rush you guys through it. And there's a number of resources, and they're on the site, so you're welcome to those resources as well. So I kind of went much faster because there's less conversation than I anticipated. But do you have any questions or any suggestions that you would like to share with the group about tying professional development and coaching together? I really do truly believe that a professional development session, no matter how wonderful it is, can only be enhanced by having somebody to support the implementation of those ideas that are presented in the professional learning. If you don't have a question now, or you want to chat later, you can find me on Twitter. And then there's my personal email address, because I don't start with DPI until Monday, so I don't have a job at the moment. And I don't have a work email. So you get my personal email. And then at 3:30, so in a half hour, I'll be doing the coaching cycle session. And there is your QR code, so you can sign in for the session. And then make sure that you've done that attendance form. And then at the bottom, I'll stop for the QR code for a second. I'll come back to the QR code, but then there's also this feedback. If you are in the slides, and I can drop the slides link again for those of you who need it. There's the slides, and then I'm going to copy this link, and this is the feedback link. And then I'm going to pull the QR code back up for you. And if you do not have the QR code, or if you don't have the QR reader or the app just yet, you can also do your attendance there. So I'm going to give you about 20 minutes of your time back today, unless you have questions, or if you want to sit here and chat with me, I'm good with that too.